2 weeks ago, Instagram Reels. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm about to go to school. I'm scrolling on Reels to pass the time. All of a sudden, I see this video pop up on my page that says, look, I built the Skyview Tower from Tears of the Kingdom in Minecraft. And I go, wow, that's actually really cool. I want to do something like that. The only thing is, the Skyview Tower, it's kind of complicated, and I kind of don't want to do that. And I also don't want to straight up copy the guy. My solution? I build the Breath of the Wild tower, and I make a video on that instead. And that is where we are now. I have now built the Breath of the Wild tower, and I will now yap about the Breath of the Wild tower because Breath of the Wild is, I think, in my top 5 things ever. Just on the planet. So yeah, there's a lot to go over.
What? We're flying to Philadelphia! Oh, hell no! That's hell!
I think I'm just gonna start in order of what I built first, which in this case is actually this little pillar on the inside. I'm just gonna open that and then maybe just break that and then just kind of if I can get in here, maybe just maybe just break that too. And maybe open that. Okay, there we go. We'll fix that later. But anyways, this is the little blue pillar shekiah tower thing. Well, it's, the whole thing is a shekiah tower, but this is the little pillar thing that's on the inside of a tower in Breath of the Wild. I don't really know what they're called, but I'll put an image up on screen just to kind of show you guys what I'm talking about. But I think, again, if you played Breath of the Wild, you kind of get the general gist of it all. Just gonna drop down here. As you can see, I only used like 5 or so different blocks for this part, but it's a very small part. So I actually think having 5 blocks makes it a lot more detailed than any of the other parts of this build. And I kind of appreciate that it's one of the most detailed parts of this, even though it's on the inside of this, just because I think even if it's not super visible, from outside of this part, I think it just gives that extra little touch that if you do look inside of it, you will notice it, right? So just kind of looking up and down this way, you can kind of see all the different blocks I used. Blue concrete powder. I love concrete powder. Concrete powder is like my absolute go. Best block in Minecraft, no matter what color, except for the fact that it can fall. Only thing I don't like about it. Other than that, the texture is perfect, right? Other than that, blue wool. I also used very similar to the colors of these two. Maybe a little bit darker than the concrete powder, but it has more texture, so just a little good in between the two. Now, some of the more interesting parts I think would be the lichen and the lanterns, the copper lanterns that I used for the lighting. Now, I could talk about why I use these, but I think it's easier to just show you if we come back the way we came in, and then maybe just go around to the other sides, we don't see that part. But if we just hit this, time, set, night, then you can see why, right? Coming back over here into this little area, you can kind of see that the lichen and the lanterns is what really gives it its glow. And even though it's not like a super integral part of the build, I think that having at least a little bit of the same glow that the towers do in Breath of the Wild in this tower that I built in Minecraft, I think it was a really good thing to incorporate in its own way. You can also see it up there a little bit, but we'll talk about that more later. So those are the main purposes of why they're there. But I also just think that the fact that these lanterns being smaller than the size of an average block, and just, you know, the random nature of some of these pieces of lichen, it just adds even more texture to an already textured thing, which in this case is not a bad thing. Sometimes it can be a bad thing, but I think having these little broken blocks out where the lanterns are gives it a lot more shape, like how it does in Breath of the Wild, which I think is really cool. So yeah, that's about it for this part. It's not a ton to see from the outside, but it is also a lot to see from the outside. On first glance, you'd think it'd be a minor part of the build, but I think overall, it's almost one of the most integral parts to it. So I like it a lot. Just gonna fix this real quick. And anyways, let's move on to our next part.
This is my first video on Instagram. I'm not wearing a shirt, it's a shirt.
Which in this case is the part on the outside of the pillar, which is the fence part thing itself. I don't really know what to call it. In the game, you use it to climb up the towers and then use these little platform parts as to where you regain your stamina. I'll talk more about these later since I built them later, but this part was kind of tricky for me, even though it seems really simple on the outside, just because I felt like we don't have enough individual blocks to kind of get that style, that chain link, I don't know, just to kind of get that style that this part on the towers have in Breath of the Wild. Like, you have the fences, you have these little gates, and then you maybe have a few other blocks, but other than that, you can't really do much. You're very limited for blocks that look like this. I don't really know what to call them. Transparent blocks, I would say, but also they're not really transparent. But yeah, I'm still not 100% happy with how much of this is see-through and what's not see-through. I wish you could see the pillar part on the inside just a little bit more, but I did what I could. So yeah, as you can see, we have all fences going up along the sides. We have the fences in the middle too. But then every other row up here, we have fence gates in the middle, which is another one of those things which I think is a minor detail, but also adds a lot, like a lot in this case. It kind of fixes the problem, not 100%, but it kind of helps the problem of being a little bit more see-through, because obviously right here, it doesn't connect to these bottom fences as much. You get more of like an open area in there. And then I also just think that having them break up the fences in between helps this part be not so the same, for lack of a better word. But again, it kind of gives some variation in what is a very limiting part of this build in terms of blocks. But I think overall it turned out pretty good. Not 100% good, but pretty good. You can also see that as we come up here, it gets more narrow like it does in the game, and then you can come up to this part, which I won't go up there right away because, again, that is later. But yeah, one other note before we move on to the next part is the difference between shapes in this build and the actual Breath of the Wild tower. You may or may not have noticed, maybe you did, maybe you didn't, that this tower has 4 sides, while the Breath of the Wild one has, I think, 5. I might be misremembering that, but I think that's right. And while that's all fine and dandy in a game that is not made out of all square blocks, and a game like Minecraft that is made out of all square blocks, I kind of really didn't want to do much diagonal for this, to be honest. So I kind of decided to bend the rules a bit, and instead of making this a 5-pillar side thing, I would just do 4 and then keep it simple like that. That also applies in a few different areas, like these little side bits that we'll get to. On the original towers in the game, there's 4 of them, and that's just because rather than trying to work against the way that Minecraft is with diagonals, I just decided I'd work with it and just bend the rules a little bit of what it actually looks like. Same thing up here, supposed to be 3 of these, but I built 4. Now, I know I just said that I'd get to these parts later, but they are the next part that I did work on, so we're getting to them now. These side parts were arguably the hardest part of this build for me, especially these little bits right here. In the actual game of Breath of the Wild, they're more organic shapes. They're not very geometric at all. And trying to make organic shapes on such a small scale in Minecraft on a diagonal is definitely a feat. But I think I did it. It's another one of those situations where you kind of bend the rules a bit to get the results that you want. For example, like, I think it's up here, maybe down here, I'm not sure. There's a part where one of these big holes is actually supposed to be 2 holes that are little and are broken up by a little thing in between. Again, I can't remember if it's up here or over there, but that's what's supposed to be there. And just look, I think it's right here. Just looking at what you can and can't put right here, I think it was better for me not to split these up, just because I think any way I would have tried to do it would have looked really awkward, especially when this is already such a fake it till you make it maybe kind of thing already. You kind of have to force it to work, but in the end, I think I really got the main shape of it, which I think is really what matters. And again, as I mentioned, there's 4 of them, not 3 of them.
Is that really what I look like, man? I need to lose weight immediately. That is really, really bad, dude.
In between, we are looking at the brown part of the base, main part, I don't really know. The part that doesn't stick out, we are looking at that part. As you can see, I decided to kind of stick with the wood thing that we had going on, using the, what should I call it? I think it's the stripped dark oak? Yeah. That or it's a spruce, but I think it's dark oak. Yeah, it's stripped dark oak and the dark oak planks. I didn't originally have these planks in here as a texture just because the texture in Breath of the Wild is more of a clean look to it, but when I got up there, which we'll get to later, I used more stairs and slabs, which used more of this color, and I just decided to try it out and incorporate it into this part too, and I think it actually turned out pretty well. It gives more texture to it, which, I'm gonna be honest, I like going heavy on textures. You might be able to tell, but I just think it makes it look so much better. And then yet another instance of rule breaking in this scenario. A lot of rule breaking in this build, but just another instance of rule breaking in this build and working around what the actual limitations of Minecraft are. Instead of having direct diagonal lines on this part of the tower like it does in Breath of the Wild, I kind of just decided to do more of like a scattered, mostly vertical, horizontal in some places, just a more scattered approach to the way that all of these lines form and connect on this little instance here. We have some of the chains coming down over here to represent some of those, again, more vertical lines. An occasional one of these more horizontal. These kind of look funny to me though because they don't connect totally to any specific point on the build, so I didn't use too many of them. But in place of those, we have some of these oxidized copper bars, I think, just to kind of get more of a horizontal thing on there, even if it is bigger than these. And then we also use these warped wood buttons for some of the randomized dots. You can also see that there are more scattered lanterns on the side of this. I can just set it to night again. You might have already seen this when I showed this part, but I think part of the beauty of the towers in Breath of the Wild is how even when it's night, you can see them glow from almost anywhere on the map. And I feel like it was really important to me to keep that. And even though it might look a little bit wonky and not 100% like the actual towers in Breath of the Wild, I think that having these lanterns here really helped keep that glow to it from a distance. If we just, I'll come over here. Yeah, you can really see how it just helps illuminate the whole tower along with the base that's inside. The lighting is mostly from the base inside, but I don't think it would look nearly as neat as it does without the lanterns on the top. So yeah, just gonna put that back today and then come back over here. That's about it for that part. I guess as a last note kind of thing, the only thing else to talk about would be these little sign parts up here, and that's just because on the original Breath of the Wild builds, it has parts where this beige looking part is wider and thicker than it is on some other areas, and I originally was just going to keep the entire perimeter part of the edges just this color, just because I was like, oh, as another rule breaking thing. But as a compromise, I kind of found a workaround to that where I just used these dark oak signs to just break up the colors a little bit. So even though there is a lot of rule breaking in this build, there are also little instances here and there where I did really want to keep the realism aspect there, and this is one of them.
Doesn't it feel good though?
Yeah, I kind of feel dope right now.
You look dope. What was that?
Breathing.
Oh.
And then we come to the top of the tower, including this little top part and the actual base of the tower where you get your map. Now, I'll come up here first just because that's what I built first because, you know, we're going in order. It's kind of a theme. For the third time now, these are in 4s, not 3s, because it would have been a pain to build on the diagonal, but I think it worked out. For these little diagonal parts, as you can see, I just used a mix of the same stripped wood we used for this part, mix of fences and then slabs just to build it up there, and then actually a weird little detail I added was these mud brick pillars. I think I'm saying that right. I think I'm saying that right, but I'm not going to go back to bother to check. It doesn't match the colors exactly of the builds, and they aren't used anywhere else in the builds, but I felt like it just looked awkward to have this be an empty space right here. Like, just imagine it without that pillar there. It would look kind of empty, and I feel like just putting another one of the oak fences right there, it wouldn't look as natural. And I thought that the only way that I could really achieve a more fuller look without using another fence was with a pillar. And I thought that I would have used a sandstone one as my first choice, but when I used it, it actually felt like it stood out more because of how bright it was. So even though this is more of a brownish color than a tan, I think it still works a lot better than a sandstone pillar would. Not a major detail and not one that's super important in the grand scheme of things, but again, it's one of those little details that I think makes all the difference. And then coming up to the very top of the build, which I still think is a little bit finicky, is the very top. There's a little bit of a story behind this, right? I, up until this point, had all of these other parts done, except for these little platform parts. I did those last, or maybe second to last, I don't really remember. But as you can see, I was like, oh, just building, going along my day, I'm almost done with the main part. And then I get to the very top, and I realize, oh, I built this on evens. I don't have a middle block. And in my brain, I went, oh shit. But I also was like, oh, well, I don't want to rebuild that. So instead of rebuilding it, I just decided to half-ass it and use bookshelves for the very first time in my entire life, just to half-ass it and just say, whatever. We'll think about it harder next time, because I just didn't want to take care of that. And even though I definitely think it still looks wonky in some aspect, I think what we did was the best with what we had without rebuilding the entire thing. I think the use of these bookshelves is really what sells the idea that it's at least kind of pointy, because if we just had the stairs like this, it would have looked very blunt, which it still does look blunt, but it doesn't look as blunt as it would if it was just the stairs. So I guess that kind of worked out in its own little weird way. But yeah. Something, though, about these bookshelves that made me very happy was that they are the same color as the stripped dark oak instead of the planks, right? Them being that color made it so much easier for me to texture with the dark oak planks and the bookshelves than it would have if they were just the dark oak planks. And I just, with all the trouble that I had with this part, I just think it was a little bit of silver lining there for myself. And then as you can see, it also kind of helped in the way of texture with these oak ones, because on the actual tower, there's just little random parts where the tan part, beige part, whatever you want to call it, kind of crawls up to the top. And I wasn't going to do like fully formed lines that went up, but having these little darkened part on the bookshelves, along with just like the way the lines are on the oak stairs and slabs, I think really goes together in a way that makes it look pretty nice. And then we come to the actual little part where you get your map. This is supposed to be your travel point. I'm not 100% happy with it, but I really didn't want to make it too big. I really don't think I really could have made it any much better with a 9x9 space, because again, I didn't want to make it humongous, but I also didn't want to just make it like one block. So I wasn't really happy with the way that I use these trapdoors. I like the color, but I don't necessarily like that it leaves all this open space in between them. So even though I think the buttons aren't a perfect solution, I do think it helps to at least kind of fill in that space between them, which I think is good. And then as you can see, we can just go around and look at all the little texturing around the edges of just, again, where more of that beige kind of crawls in. And then we have the middle part, which has my very, very half-assed, what do you even call them? I forget. The central point. I can't remember what they're called. The part where you get your map. I don't know. That's what it's supposed to be. I would have used a lectern here, but again, I accidentally used a block thing that didn't have a middle. So that's on me. I just used more bookshelves, and I wasn't going to play with it too much more because the more I did, the more it looked weird. That's about it for that part. As you can also see, instead of the 3, or is it 3? Yeah. Instead of the 3 openings you have on the tower in Breath of the Wild, we have the 2. Instead of 5 and 3, we went 4 and 2. Same thing kind of happened up here, right? More just use of bookshelves because I didn't use a block palette? I don't know. Just a block thing with a middle. Probably should have done that, but I didn't. And then we also use more lanterns up here just to kind of represent that little line that's in between this little ceiling part here and the part where the map drops down from. Originally, I didn't really want to make it as noticeable as it was, but I think having our light extend up here was also pretty important, so I just decided to say whatever and just use the big lanterns. And I think they look good, so I don't think it's that much of an issue. And then on to the last part of the actual tower that I did was these little platforms. There's nothing much to see. They're mostly just stripped wood on the top here, and then all these stairs and stuff coming down. And then they have this sort of curved shape in Breath of the Wild that I didn't want to completely try to replicate because I think it would have just looked too awkward to me. But I think the use of trapdoors here really helped with, just because even though I didn't want to completely replicate it, it looked very flat just having everything like end. So having the trapdoors here just helped it give a little bit more of that shape, even though it's not like 100% perfect. It's a very common theme in this build, I find. And then that's it for the tower. Just a little side note down here. This isn't really specific to any Breath of the Wild tower, but I just decided to have a little bit of fun here and do a little bit of terraforming around the tower. Just because some of the towers in Breath of the Wild usually have like rocks or just different kinds of terrain around them, and I didn't really want it to just end. So as you can kind of see here, I just used tough stone and andesite just to kind of get some boulders in here to surround it, integrate more into this actual like cliff part. We got some coarse dirt and rooted dirt just to make it look like the rocks are more natural and where they are instead of just being dropped straight onto the grass. And then we have a couple stray little things here, stone slabs and stairs and whatnot. Just as little smaller rocks that you might find. We have some of it connecting down into this little area too, just because I thought that this looked a little bit flat. And if we have all these rocks right here, it would make sense that they were kind of more ingrained into the cliffside here. So even though it's nothing huge, there's also just a little bit there too. And then you can also see in spots here and there, we have firefly bushes, just because I really like the effect they give of the firefly little light dots in your screen. And I feel like it gives off the vibe of something kind of mystical, maybe even magical, that I think the shekiah tower, even though it is supposed to be a technological thing of the shekiah, I still think it's a vibe that it sort of gives off in a sense, because in a way, the technology in Breath of the Wild does kind of feel like magic, and it does kind of integrate itself with the magic, especially in Tears of the Kingdom with the Zorai. Now, obviously, Breath of the Wild towers are kind of before that time, but I still think it just kind of gives off that vibe. The last detail, and the most tiniest and most minor of them all, but which I think is arguably my favorite, is this little copper golem. And this guy was a last-minute decision to add just because I was looking for something else just because I was in the item menu and I was just looking through and I was like, is there anything else I want to put in here? And I haven't really played the copper update yet, and I just saw him and I was like, oh, let's just put him on the edge here. But I won't say it's not for no reason. In different towers of Breath of the Wild, you have different characters that have either gotten stuck at the top of the towers or are Rito and have flown to the top of the towers, and who Jesus Christ. And who just kind of hang out up there, whether it's just as like a little Easter egg or it's for a mini game or whatever, they just kind of hang out up there. And I think having this guy here, even though it's not like supposed to be like a Zora or a Rito or like a Hylian or anything, I still think having this guy up here is kind of reminiscent of that detail of the game. And I just like him a lot. I think he's just cute up here, and I think It's just a minor little detail that adds more life to the build. So yeah, I know that was a very yappy, I don't know. I know it's a very yapper conversation that I know there's very yapper-ish talk that I had about this build, but I felt like playing Minecraft again, and I felt like building something that I thought was cool, and I think Breath of the Wild is really cool. And instead of stressing myself out about how I would make a video or building it, being like, oh, I spent this many weeks doing this many blah, 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 on like survival, I figured I'd just build it and then just figure it out later because I do like making videos, but I also just want to kind of enjoy the way I play Minecraft sometimes on my own. So that's what kind of inspired this. And it's also not like the video format is new. Again, if you want to see another video like this, I would recommend checking out the Overgrown Metro video that I did a while back. It's not the perfect video, it's from March, I think, but if you want to, go check it out because I still think that build is pretty cool. But yeah, anyways, as always, if you like this video, like, subscribe, do all the things that YouTubers always tell you to do, and yeah, bye-bye.